price. If I pick up on that, I immediately put the risk budget to 150%, and I call that the A tax. And that's usually, it's whatever number will make me happy to deal with that attitude.
This is the Fearless Pricing Podcast, where we meet and talk about real-life pricing experience. I'm your host, Filip Fucic.
Hello and welcome back to the Fearless Pricing Podcast. Today we have Orson Lord, YouTube specialist that has a story of trying to hit the minimums, which you'll see, but I think it will ring very familiar in many of your ears. It definitely does in mine. Orson, hi.
The main part of the story and about myself is that I'm a video marketer who's recently gone into the YouTube specialist niche. So I help businesses and personalities grow brands on YouTube that generate lots and lots of money.
That's always very welcome.
Yes.
So let's get stuck into it. Tell us your what I should have charged story.
With my what I should have charged story is it's more like a lot of little mistakes I made. So there are countless, just looking at the history of my invoices, there are countless stories of me constantly, immediately giving at the minimum price to people. And I can see that in the invoice. This is like I've calculated the cost plus a little risk, maybe a tiniest smidgen of profit, but nothing to really make you happy at the end of the day. And I guess getting into it, the main reason I was doing that was in my business, before I was getting into a lot of retainer services, I would have a lot of highs and a lot of lows. There was a number I needed to hit every month to make sure that the company was making revenue, paying me, and doing an acceptable level of profit. Some months, I did triple that. Awesome. And then a lot of months, I would sometimes do none of that. It was just like high highs, low lows. And the more the lows got low, the more I started discounting the prices. I started turning them down because I'm like, oh, well, if I'm not getting anything this month and look, let's be real, like we're going back in the days when budgets were getting a bit tighter, at least where I'm from, people weren't spending as much. And the first thing they cut is marketing. And then especially video marketing, it's more on the premium end of things. So immediately I'm going, well, budgets are getting tight. Let's draw this number down. And looking back, I don't see an increase in sales by reducing the price. I just see a reduce in the price on what else charging. And that's basically my biggest mistake. It's just I kept turning the faucet on the discount.
Yeah, because I mean it sounds logical, right? People want to pay less. If I turn the price down, I'm going to have more revenue because still I will have more clients. Except it doesn't work because it's premium. But there's another thing that people do, and you might have tried that as well, which is keeping on value.
Yeah,
on one side, you're asking less. On the other side, you're promising more.
I like more deliverables. Yeah, I'll turn your horizontal video into a vertical video. No extra charge. I'll do a bunch of cross-platform conversions. I'll make a square video, a vertical video, so you can put it on everywhere. I'll write your description. So I'll give you the shebangs. And yeah. So I would do that.
So the premise is, if they could only see just how good a deal this is, then I wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried that one, especially the heaping one, but also the decreasing one. And it's kind of a siren voice calling you into your decrease your prices will all be fine. Did it work?
No. Basically the sales stayed the same. No one said no to the cheaper price, but I didn't get any more yeses.
Because this is what happens. We think of that's like pricing elasticity in boring economics terms. We think it like, okay, this is 100%, so 100 clients at $100. So if I have $80, I will have about 120 clients, right?
Yeah.
Except no. What we do is inelastic, price-wise inelastic, which means that it moves slower either way. The reaction is lower than, let's say, expected one, which means if you give a discount of 20%, you will have less than, sometimes zero, in the number of clients. But also, which you might have figured out as well, especially since we work together, is if you increase it like 20%, you also don't lose 20% of clients.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the reaction is lower than expected both ways. So what you did was very typical during Corona. I had a bunch of clients doing 20, 30% cheaper services back then. They got less money. reliably, but not any more sales. So
Yeah.
this is why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So why this happens is if you think about medicine, right? Well, what would happen if a medicine that I need got up 20%? I would bloody well pay for it.
Yeah.
Even if there are cheaper brands, I don't trust them. So if it won't, ruin me financially, I won't even think about switching because that. And what you do, is based on trust. And as long as people don't trust you, the lower price doesn't mean much. And if they do trust you, higher price doesn't mean much. So that's the same logic.
Yeah.
Now, could you tell me the distinction? You said so the minimal cost and then a little risk and a smidgen of profit. When you calculated that back then, what was the difference? How did you calculate the risk? How did you calculate in the profits?
Well, okay. You know what? I'll bear all on this bit. Risk is basically, I can break it down. My projects are broken into
Yeah.
three numbers. There's costs, which is literally like how much direct costs. So, if I'm filming an ad, do I have to buy a costume? Direct cost. I have to pay myself as an employee for that time? Direct costs. Or technically, I'd be putting the other part, which is where I technically should be going, is operational expenses, which is costs I incur that I'm always going to occur, whether the project happens or not. So I had a way of figuring out how much operational expenses and costs to associate to a project. And that being like this is what the project is expected to cost. But on every project, there's also risks. I call it the F up budget because, the creative world, we don't think of, oh, there's a risky project here. We think Dan effed up and he didn't bring the camera and now we've got to do a reshoot and that's cost us. So I call it the F up budget just because it literally makes us click a bit better. And the F up budget ranges on normal. It's 15% is a normal amount. And I will change that for varying things. So one of the things I'll do is and I learned this really early on from the worst mistake I made, but if I'm dealing with a sociopath or someone with those tendencies, they try to manipulate you into a better price. If I pick up on that, I immediately put the risk budget to 150% and I call that the A tax. And that's usually, it's whatever number will make me happy to deal with that attitude. So that's probably that's one thing I don't get wrong is dealing with bad attitudes. But usually I would lower the risk. I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to take on more risk. So instead of my usual 15%, I'd make it 5%. And sure enough, I'd still end up having to pay that 15% risk. And then finally, there's profit, which is just the money left over that the company owners, which is just me, gets to take home at the end of the quarter in the profit distributions. I try to treat my small company like a big one.
Yes. Though the instinct of lowering the whole thing in order to get more sales is misguided. You're doing some things completely right. So paying yourself, I've seen tons of people not doing that.
Yeah.
Because they say, well, it doesn't really cost me anything. I would be paying this, I'm working from home. I would be paying this electricity. Anyway, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like if you wouldn't be doing something, if there was no client, then that's a cost for sure.
Yeah.
So that's good. And of course, the a-hole tax is very profound.
Yes. And what I noticed
as a solution.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they all say no, which is the main thing. I think that I talked to a psychologist about this the other, I was just in a random social media chat room and I was talking to them about it, and they brought up the most profound thing, which was they go, "What's really special about doing that?" And I didn't realize this is that they're saying no, so they feel like they've won, but in reality, I've won by not having to work with them. So we actually both won. But if I say I don't want to work with you, they can come back in a lot of pretty bad ways. Like they can leave you a 1-star review. They can be quite angry at you, but when you give them the power to say no, it's just a clean cut and no one gets hurt at the end of the day, which is great.
Has it ever happened to you that you tried that and they said yes?
No, but I would be happy with that price. Yeah.
It happened to me. I knew I would be happy at the end. I wasn't happy in the middle of it. I probably haven't charged enough, but
a whole tax needed to go up.
Yeah. It was a project that I knew how much they would be getting out of it. I asked, not wanting to do that, and well, with them, I asked for 90% of what they would be getting out of it, thinking that their ego would absolutely not let them say yes. And what I got was, and you said you were expensive. Damn it.
Oh no.
So what I neglected to see is that they wanted that because that would allow them to get something else, and they really didn't care. So this was I had to slog through it, you know.
Yeah.
But yes, I needed to charge even more. But I thought, if I ask for 100%, then it would be clear what I'm doing. It would be clear that I'm actually avoiding working with them. And like 90% is extremely cheeky, but still technically
Yeah.
easy to spot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we continue, I'd like to suggest two things. Firstly, if this is the first time you're tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe and hear the next story in a week. And second, if you feel you could do with a little more fearless pricing content, look in the show notes for the link to the popular, short, and sometimes funny biweekly newsletter. That's it. Let's get back to the show.
So anyway, that
Numbers.
didn't work. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You said, a tiny bit of profit, but nothing that would make you happy. What makes you happy with the price? Price makes you happy. Let's put it like that.
Good question. So, what price makes me happy? The biggest thing I'd say with the price is, so one, obviously all my costs are covered. Anything that went wrong was covered as well. Or even if anything didn't go wrong, I still had that money to the side. And then I guess if I had to go with honestly, is my profit margins. Just if as long as I'm seeing them increase year on in, year on out, is the objective. Hasn't been the case, I'll be honest. But that's my objective. If I go, so just to give you an idea, most video production companies only make a 2% profit margin. They're bottom of the barrel. It's very low. The second you become like a design agency, it's a 20% profit margin on average. So a lot of the times I won't even describe myself as someone who creates videos. I'm the one who helps design the media or design what you're creating or come up with a strategy, because immediately it is just that much easier based on industry standards. So for me, 20% would actually be very happy. That's like usually in the current game I was and am playing, it's getting myself to 20% profit margins. Things that would make me less happy, and this is some of the things I would do, because I had these numbers, I would sometimes play with them to try and reduce the number, which either silly or not, but I'll do things like, oh, you know what, maybe the like allocated hourly rate I'm paying myself as an employee, maybe that's too high. Let's just tell myself as an employee I'm no longer getting paid as much. That made me very unhappy, but it put things within budgets. Yeah, so it'd be I'd play with those numbers very creatively, which is, very messy thing to do, but that's what I did to try and, back in the day, reduce numbers to try and get more sales.
Okay. I mean, your description, so whether you describe yourself as somebody that does videos or somebody that designs this or that, people often feel like that shouldn't matter, right? My profitability shouldn't 10x just because I say this or that.
Yeah.
But it does. And sometimes it's even important to give a hint. Part of your job is something that you don't really do. You have, somebody else do that or something like that. What I mean is, let's say that you go into a specialty doctor's clinic, and you have to wait there along with other people. And while you wait, somebody is violently sick on the floor. And well, that's unfortunate, but you're at the doctor's office. So a cleaning lady comes and cleans it up, and okay. And once you get into the doctor's office, you realize that the cleaning lady was actually the doctor. Now, there's no reason why you should mind that, but your view of her expertise is never going to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because why would she be the one cleaning the sick? There's got to be something wrong with this. There's nothing wrong about doing any of those jobs, but you are no longer viewing the expertise in the same way. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I can see that, because I don't know if you got more of the story to say, but I'm assuming.
No, go on.
I'm assuming if you saw the doctor in the reverse order, so like let's say you saw the doctor, they treated you, you were very happy, and then you went out and someone was sick, and then that doctor went out to go clean the spew, you might go, well, you've already had that good experience, so you're going to go, look at that doctor going above and beyond to do their job. So you go, and I noticed that in the order, like if I start with video editing and thumbnail design, which is pretty much a very core thing of what we do, it's then very hard to sell the strategy or the thinking. But if we start with the strategy and the thinking, which is honestly what I'm better at, it's a lot easier to charge that high ticket service and then do, well, look, we actually have a thumbnail editing thing, so you don't have to think about it on the side. And they go, great. But it's interesting. Just the order things go in will change the perceived value of who I am.
And so we're not selling to robots.
No.
Robots wouldn't care. That's 5 + 2 equals 2 + 5, right? But we do. We are not. We are very far from robots, and that's just a very human thing. Have you done something with your pricing recently that helped you go beyond the logic of if I reduce the price, I'll get more sales?
Yes, I did. So what happened was is I had a thing with you, which allowed me to like, evaluate how I was doing my pricing and my thinking behind it. And one of the things, and it's been a month or two since we've done it, and the one thing that's really stuck with me is that, changing, and this is right from the beginning of the podcast, changing your price doesn't change the revenue, or like reducing price does not increase the amount of sales I'm getting. It just reduces the price I charge. So what I ended up doing was I just went, okay, well, what's that actual number that I wanted to charge so that I could have a scalable business that makes me happy to work here? And I went from taking it from like a $1,500 or a $3,000, which was like literally cutting costs and paying me not enough was basically what I was doing to achieve that. And I just took it to $8,000. So it's anywhere from 6 to 8 grand is where I'll keep that price. And that changes honestly based on the US dollar and the Australian dollar.
Of course.
Yeah, but that's where it is, and that's per month as a retainer client, and so that's a pretty high price. And what's interesting is that I haven't had anyone buy that yet, but it's still been okay because one, I'm not selling myself at a loss, which would just leave me in a worse place than if I did nothing. If I'm being honest, because what's ended up happening is one of the core things about me and my speciality is that if people weren't buying my service, instead of trying to sell more at a loss, I just started working on my company. I started building capabilities decks. I started uplifting my own YouTube channel and doing even more on that, and I ended up increasing revenue in my YouTube channel. Basically, what's happened is so I increased the price to $8,000 a month, which is what I need to have a scalable company where I can hire the people to do the work and market the company and do blah 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 blah. Awesome. Because people weren't picking up on the sale, I ended up either working on my company, which meant like working on my YouTube. That YouTube is now producing revenue that I wake up every day and there's about another 80 USD dropped into the bank account in digital product sales. So I'm like happy. That's great. Awesome. And the YouTube channel's growing 1% every 3 days. So to me, I want to get that to 1% a day because that's just a nicer thing to say, but I'm happy with it right now. Then the other thing that happened is that became a high anchor price. So because it was $8,000, people perceived me as this $8,000 solution they couldn't afford. But then what's ended up happening is I've ended up creating smaller one-off solutions again. So having that $8,000 a month became an anchor. This is what it costs to run a YouTube channel really productively in full. And then I've come up with other solutions now. The biggest one right now is I've got a strategy session happening with some actually quite iconic characters I can't say right now, but they're cool. And so they've brought me in to do the strategy. So instead of doing the full shebang, we're currently in negotiation. It's a sealed thing, but currently we're looking at an initial strategy session where we're just going to review everything. And then we've a mini monthly, basically channel analytics review service that we're doing for them now. So it's not where I'm doing a full service. It's about 2 to 4 hours a month, I would say, we're offering them, and we're doing that at a pretty good price. So that was nice. The $8,000 ended up becoming an anchor for the other smaller services, which made them look a lot more reasonable. So yeah, I was very happy with that. Things at a better price.
So one of the things that we come into pricing is the idea that every price that you set is there to sell. And if it's not, it's not doing its job, right? That's not true. One of the jobs that the price has is to signal your positioning. Who should you be compared with? So if you have a publicly available or very clear, very upfront price of $8,000, nobody will say, yeah, but there's this guy on freelancer.com that will do it for $80 a month. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I guess. So that's one of the jobs. The other is, like you said, anchoring. Okay, so maybe all of this guy's time, all of the time is $8,000. But do I really need all that? No, probably not. But I really do need this and this. So compared to those $8,000, I'm actually getting a bargain.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right?
And they immediately just trust me. a lot more. So, look, you know, there's probably a bunch of other things that helps the trust, but them seeing that on the website just makes you go, well, he must be doing something right.
Yes, absolutely. One of the other signals that you're sending out is I'm not desperate for a sale.
Mm,
I wouldn't be having this price if I was.
mm,
So you don't really come into negotiations with me and that you have me over a barrel, because you clearly don't. I will work with you if the time is right, if the price is right, if we are a good fit,
mm.
right? But that helps the attitude, or well, it should
Yeah,
help the attitude of most people, because people preying on solo creators that are in bad situations will be put off by this very clear signal that you're not
yeah,
really in a hurry here,
yeah.
which saves everybody some time.
Mm.
So even if you never sold at the $8,000, which is highly unlikely, as you will soon see,
Yes,
just from experience, from experience,
I
every time that I helped somebody set up a price like that, sooner or later they called me and said, "You'll never believe just what just happened." So every time, but even if it never happens, it still is worthwhile to do. Is a worthwhile thing to do, because all of the other functions that have
mm,
nothing to do with actual selling, right? There's another effect called the decoy price. There was this famous case in with the Economist when they had two prices, a higher and a lower one. Obviously, they mostly sold the lower one, the lower deal, and then they got another price which was slightly below the higher price, but actually a much worse deal. They started, the audience switched, and they started mostly getting the good deal,
yeah,
which was existing before, but less people bought it. Now more people bought it,
mm,
and when they removed the middle price, the most of the people dropped to the lower offering again. It's called the decoy price effect.
yeah,
So that's not what you did. I'm just saying there's more functions
yes.
to setting a price than just
Yeah,
this.
and
Oh
now
yeah, and
and now you mentioned it, and now you say that and talk about that. I guess one of the things I am noticing, I didn't think about before, but the people get a much more realistic expectation. You know this of running a YouTube channel, right? There is a lot of different efforts you can go to run a YouTube channel. You know, you
oh
can do
yeah,
it. You can do a little bit where you're giving, I don't know, a 1% of your energy and efforts and times to it, or you can do a thing where you're giving 200%, where you got like 2 or 6 people full time working on it. There's multiple ways. And what it did, I guess, by setting that, it kind of just set and they could see from the work I produced, they could see the example works and they could see the price. The $8,000 gave them a much more realistic expectation of what it takes to produce that type of content. They versus when I had it at $3,000, they thought, oh, cool, we can get someone on the side spending like a quarter of their time and we'll get it covered. It's like, no, this is like at least 2 people's worth of work to do this. You know, it was just setting that price made expectations more realistic. Which again, I guess, yeah, gets a bit back into that anchoring we're talking about, and you know what you're talking about. The price has multiple
yeah.
functions. It realistically sets the effort.
Expectations are important here, very
Mm,
much. By the way, there's another one that I remembered, which is sacrificial price, which
mm,
is an add-on that you price highly, but separately, so that people can say, "Oh, I don't want that one." And then he said, "Oh, okay, fine, you talked me into it." When this is not the same thing, but when I was setting up this company, I got a government grant for fairly significant amount of money, enough to buy the most expensive laptop on the market.
mm,
I knew it would be a hard sell, because the money, you don't have to return it, but they have to approve it, right?
mm,
So I took the laptop and a stylus, which is, $70 stylus or something
yeah,
like that, because it's fancy, right? And they said, "Oh, you're not a graphic artist. We can't approve the stylus." Okay,
yeah,
you got me. You can also price something as a sacrificial thing.
yeah, yeah. Got
Two things. One would be, what would you, after all of your experiences now, what would you give out as advice to other people like you in other areas struggling with their pricing? What would your advice be?
So I think like that. I guess the biggest thing I would have to say is just literally charge what's gonna make you happy, with a few if conditions. But if the price you're charging doesn't make you happy, you figure that out for yourself. But one, at a bare minimum, price should make you happy. There is one strong if which I've taken which has really helped me grow and pivot into a better direction, which is if it's the first 3 projects, I might sell it at a loss, but I'm not saying, oh, I'm not going to go to the person and give them a $3,000 service and charge $1,000. I'm going to say, hey, I got a $3,000 service, but if you allow me to take all your analytics, do anything behind the scenes, and leave me an honest review at the end, I will discount it by $2,000. But the condition is you got to give me that, or I'm going to charge you the full $3,000, and you agreeing now that you will pay it if you don't give me that. So like they see that I'm valuing their marketing, the marketing materials I'm going to grab at $2,000. And the only reason I make that exception is I'm not happy with that price, but I am happy with that deal at the end because I made a little exchange. And I only just say that because I made that mistake early on as well, where I went, great, I'm just going to charge full price, and that's that, and that didn't work very well. So I needed to, I just needed to get more realistic with what made it, with getting the sale versus being happy, if that makes sense.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Go.
You know Chris Do the Future. He talks around subjects like this and that. So you may have noticed that I'm very in tune with like profit risks and all that. And there's a story behind that, why I'm like that. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, even though it happened in public. And I'll just tell the story. Let's just go from the beginning. So Chris Do comes to my city that I live in, Brisbane, and he does a pricing workshop for creatives. And somewhere in the middle of it all, he goes, all right, can someone share their number? What are they roughly doing in their costs and profit? And no one puts their hand up. I thought I was pretty good. So I was like after 30 seconds, I'm like, I can't hand this. I'll do it. So he goes, okay, what are your costs? And I go, buh, 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 buh. And he goes, writes them down on the whiteboard. And I go, okay, what's your profit? And he goes, net or gross? And I didn't really know what it meant at the time. So I splurted out one of the numbers and he goes, what? That's your profit? Yeah. You have absolutely no financial literacy. You're not going to survive. Here, let's start from the top. And went back, and I just sunk in my share because here is like an icon to me, belittling me. And I'm going, oh no. And then the second he starts writing anything on the whiteboard, I just heard a tidal wave of pen scribbles. Just no one knew what any of this was. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. But I really took that with me and ran home with it.
A beta price is good advice. I can't say much about this. It's just, do you think it matters that your quality is not top notch in the first 3 to 5 projects? Do you think that matters to clients?
Oh, I think it does. I think it matters that the quality is top notch in the first 3. Absolutely.
If it isn't?
Oh, if it is not in top quality, I think that would matter.
It would if they could see it. This is something that people struggle with a lot, and I did as well. Usually, you're the only one in that conversation that can tell that the quality is not as it should be. They usually can't tell. It's completely fine to work with your conscience and say, this is not actually what it needs to be. But in most cases, you are going to see faults that your client doesn't care or doesn't know enough to care about. Maybe they should, but they won't. So my advice here is fine. Reduce the price for the first one, the second one, maybe the third one.
Yeah.
Probably consecutively less and less.
Yes.
But never substitute your own view of your work, which is just based on so much more knowledge about what you do and what is to be expected, for the clients. Let them tell you if something was wrong. And even if it's full of holes and they're perfectly happy, just do better next time.
Yeah.
But nobody won by you charging less than they are happy to pay. Nobody won. There's no prize for being the moral victor, except an empty bank account.
Yeah.
So that's the only challenge that I would have here. Cool. Orson, where can people find you except YouTube?
Oh, well, if you're not looking for me on YouTube, then the other 2 best places is LinkedIn or my website, Mediable. That's Media, MEDIA. And then B for Bravo, L for Lima, E for Echo. So it's like Mediable. Anything can be media. Like to guess what you would say about the name.
Cool. Very well. Thank you for being here and sharing all of that with us. And dear listener, see you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to hear more, simply subscribe. Until next time, your host, Philip